Now, last but not least for this conference, we have one more speaker to come up on the stage. We have award-winning journalist Angela Misery, who is going to talk about digital media and how it continues to transform and change our landscape. So without further ado, please welcome Angela.
Hello. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. So let's see if I could bring up my presentation first. Oh, there we are. Awesome. So I would like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to speak at the Emerge conference. And when we talk about paths, which is what I was asked to come and speak about, the paths that lead you and the paths that take you places, I can't tell you that I foresaw this moment of getting to speak in front of such amazing and passionate students. I know people like to talk about luck, and we can talk about luck later, but I think anyone who has seen success will tell you luck is only part of it. Let me tell you about the rest of it. So we all start from somewhere. I started in Calgary, Alberta. For me, starting in Calgary, that meant that I was also the daughter of Indian immigrants. My parents were the only members of their family to leave India. And for me, that meant my path was laid out before me before I was even born. Maybe? I was supposed to be a boy. Let's start there. Immediate fail. Okay, fine. Okay, fine, a girl. That's fine. We'll take a girl. A girl who marries an Indian boy, obviously. I'm not making this up, by the way. I'm not being stereotypical. This was actually my path that was laid out before me. I was told it a lot. My parents were actually rebels in their own minds because they didn't want me to marry an Indian doctor. They wanted me to be an Indian doctor. So to them, that was a huge step forward, like in terms of gender stereotypes, big. So this was my path that I was set upon before I was even born. I tell you this now because how my path diverged is even more impressive based on where I started from. So I'm hoping you can see this little girl living in Calgary. If you can imagine, there weren't a lot of Indians living in Calgary when I lived there, which was, I guess, 85 would be the year when we started to live there. I was a curious bookworm. I read detective fiction, that's what I did. I was socially inept. This is still true. You can ask James. We went to school together. He can tell you all about my social ineptness. I had freckles, even though I'm supposed to be brown, so that was another fail. And I was walking down a path that I really didn't pick. So fast forward. Fast forward to February of my 13th year. And as you can imagine, 13 is already a glorious year. 13 years old is a glorious year. So two things happened to me that year that I credit with changing my path. Firstly, I wrote a Valentine's Day computer program for my mother. Yes, that's as nerdy as it sounds. I wrote it in Turbo Pascal 6, which I don't even think exists anymore, but it's like an MS-DOS except it's Turbo Pascal. It allowed you to enter your name, and when you entered your name, like these hearts would appear all around, and then it would play and it would flash and it had blink tags and stuff. Anyway, that's what I created for my mother for my 13th year, and that was life-changing for me because I did something completely outside of anything my family had ever done, and on my own, I just taught myself to program. And second, I won a writing contest. So my grade 8 teacher took a poem I had written for class and entered it in this province-wide contest without really telling me, and I won. And I was published at 13. So I tell you this because it changed me. It opened up a world of possibilities that I had never thought open to me as a South Asian girl growing up in Calgary in a minority on a path that I didn't pick. So I wrote a program for my mother because code to me is like detective fiction. I don't know if everyone sees this, but it is for me. It's got clues, it's got if-then logic, and when you resolve a piece of code, it's like the best reveal and the best mystery. That's the same way I think about code as I think about mysteries. I write fiction because I have characters in my head clamoring to be heard. These are two things I know about myself now that I didn't know about myself at 13. And I'd really like to tell you that I came home with those two things, that code that I'd written and that book that I'd been published in, and that point exactly led me to this one. But it's never that easy. Because here's what I know now. You have to watch for those moments. You have to understand their significance. And you have to fight for them. You have to listen to them. Because they will help you find your path. So I was 13, so when I ran home to the dinner table and I announced I was going to be a writer, absolutely no one listened to me. Absolutely no one listened to me. My father actually said to me, I said, I'm going to be a writer. And he said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to medical school. It'll be great. And then you're going to write medical textbooks. And I was like, not exactly what I had in mind. Anyway, so 13 years old, obviously I stayed on my parents' path. I took science all through high school. Scraped by with the bare minimum marks, I entered pre-med, God help us all, at the University of Calgary, and I went on academic probation immediately, because I can't do the science, just in case you thought I could. My GPA was a tell no one 1.6 out of 4. Good times. I kept writing, because that was all that was keeping me sane. I kept coding, but it was always on the side. I struggled through zoology, organic chemistry. I'm saying these out loud now seems like a fictitious moment, but anyway. The advanced calculus, which I took 3 times, failed every time. I grew more depressed and more withdrawn and just was convinced that I was just a useless failure that was never going to be anything. So that's me at 18. The only class I attended in those dark years where I felt like myself was the one no one took seriously, Introduction to Shakespeare. Oop, science, Shakespeare. Back then, you couldn't graduate with a Bachelor of Science without 1 full credit in English. Not only did I get straight A's in Shakespeare, so you can imagine what my GPA looks like. It's like F, 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 C, A. I loved Shakespeare so much. I wrote every single day that year that I took it. I wrote so much, I had to ice my hand at night. I found myself again, and I was 18 years old, and I wasn't going to be pulled off this path because I wasn't 13 anymore. I had found it again. As you can imagine, going home to my parents, this was not an easy sell, but I kept writing, I kept working to convince them. I taught myself C++ and Java and a few other programs. I had found that insatiable part of my mind, and I fed it as much learning as I could. I was in my last year of my bachelor's in English, sporting a much healthier 3.9 GPA, when I made the connection between the curiosity that led me to programming and the curiosity that drives a great journalist. I started to realize that there was employment possibilities for this curiosity, other than just me reading detective fiction and writing code. So I had all these questions that no one could answer, and my parents were fully sick of answering them for me. And I couldn't stop asking them, so I got a job as a stringer at the Calgary Herald, and I applied to the University of Western Ontario's Master's in Journalism program. I didn't have a hope in hell, because as you recall, the academic probation, I actually graduated with my English degree and got my academic probation withdrawn the day after. That's literally how long it took me to get off academic probation, because I had made such an impression on them. They couldn't let me go, even when I had a degree in my hand, and they said, okay, we'll take you off academic probation. I already have a degree, but okay, thank you. I appreciate the letter. So I thought I didn't have a hope in hell of getting into Western. And I applied so late, and I was sure no one would even read my application. So, turns out, I was wrong, because I could write. And I wrote one hell of an application essay. And I can say that now, because when I arrived at Western, the Dean of Journalism actually took me aside to tell me why he'd let me in. Which is adorable. I love this gentleman. He told me it was my letter. He said that, we were going right past it, and then we read your letter, and your statements about being 13 years old and being called out in the gym and finding out you were a writer and fighting for 5 years to become that person. So that's why I got led into Western, and I attended Western the same year as your own James McDonald down in the front. And it was the best year of my academic life. We had a very good time. And not just because it was super fun and it's Western, which is super fun, but because I was finally on the right path and I found my tribe. I didn't even know my tribe. Like, I had no tribe. Back in Calgary, I swear to God, I would go to Temple and people would be like, who's the white girl? Like, they would not, no tribe at all. So I got to Western, I found my tribe, and I'd never had that before in my life. So along with the entire class, I sent out, when I finished Western, we sent out our resumes to every newsroom we could think of, which is what you guys are doing probably right now. I did my internship at CTV News, which is up in Scarborough, and I was alongside one of my other peers at Western, and I was confident. Like, I'd found my path. I was confident that after I did those 2 weeks, I would, of course, be offered full-time work because, obviously. But I take you back to that earlier spot in the path because it's obviously what I thought. When I look at Diane Sawyer, that's what I thought I was going to be. Like, within a couple of weeks, it would take some time. But I was going to be Diane Sawyer, obviously. That's not what happened. The internship ended on a Friday, and our peer from Western was offered part-time work, and I was offered the door. I was thanked for my 2 weeks of service, and that was the gate on my path slapping me in the face. I went home that Friday night with no clear path at all for the first time in years, and I was positive I'd found it, so I had no idea, what do you do now? This is what I was supposed to do. So every doubt I'd ever had about the path I'd chosen visited me like Scrooge's ghost that weekend. It was the worst weekend of my life since my dad telling me I was going to write medical textbooks. It was the worst. This is the thing about chosen paths that I would like to pass on. With great power comes great responsibility, Spider-Man, and all that responsibility lands on you, right? So it's great power. You've chosen the path. It's chosen you, and that's a great responsibility. I don't want you to worry. This story does have a happy ending. So at 6:45 on Monday morning, so I finished Friday at CTV, no job, went home, miserable, decided I must have made a mistake not going to medical school. Actually looked up my MCAT, and it was still working. Like, I could still have gone to medical school if they ignored the academic probation and the 1.6 GPA. I could totally go, so maybe that was a new thought. Called my dad, told him he might have been right, the whole thing on the weekend. 6:45 Monday morning, I picked up the phone, and it was the CBC. And this woman named Hester was calling, and she had my resume in front of her. Now, this should have been impossible. Like, it should have been friggin' impossible. Like, I don't even understand the math of it, but it should have been impossible. She had like 100 resumes on her desk, 30 of which were probably from, like, all of our graduates from Western. She should not have been able to pick mine out of a pile at all. There you go. She had one question for me. The last line on my resume was a very short resume, as you can imagine. In small font, under interests, it said, programmer, coder, designer. Was that accurate, she said. I started at CBC at 8 a.m. that same day, and I didn't leave for 14 years. That got me in the door. This was like Angela's personal curiosity interest that nobody other than me valued, and I didn't even value the way I should have valued it. I kid you not, that one line changed my life. It's the reason it's in this resume is because it is part of who I am. As much as I love detective fiction, and as much as I love coding, all those things are part of me. There's no way that that part of my curiosity wouldn't show up on a resume or in a conversation I had with you. Like, I would totally boast about my Valentine's Day code, or the fact that I just cracked C++, or the fact that HTML5 looked really cool and I really wanted to learn it. Like, that is stuff that would come up in conversation with me. It just is. I'm a nerd and I don't hide it. So what did I learn from that moment, and what can I pass to you? There are no small things. All the things that make you, you are powerful. And you never know what someone else is going to value in you. So talk about the best things about you. And don't just talk about the things that you think are good on a resume. Talk about you, what interests you. When I hire people now, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for more than just, oh yeah, I like to write. I want to know what else it is you love to do. What else drives you? What else do you do when you're at home and you're not watching Netflix? What are you doing? Are you programming? Are you drawing cool stuff? Are you testing new audio? Like, what are you doing? That's what I want to know about you. So, missing 12. Maybe. I could make it up. Sure, it'll be fine. What can I tell you about this slide? Okay. So, I'm just going to tell you about this slide. So, I started at the CBC in news. I started at the 11 a.m. to, I think it was, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. I worked for 4 months out of Scarborough because I'd bought a place. This is the funny thing. I had rented a place in Scarborough. That is how confident I was going to work at CTV for the rest of my life. So I'd actually rented a place for a year in Scarborough, and then I had to truck myself down all the way to Front Street for 3 months at 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. for the shift. Anyway, when you did news journalism, and you did CBC.ca news journalism at that time, which was 99, was when I started at CBC, there were 4 people that were doing web journalism at the time, and there was 1 person who did the overnight. So they had a 22-year-old running CBC.ca news, me, for 3 months, which was insane. I don't understand why they were letting me do that, but they did. And it was incredible, and I learned an insane amount. And I went from that to working at CBC for Kids, which, if you've never worked for CBC for Kids, you should try to, because I got to make paper airplane videos, like how to make a paper airplane and shoot them. Like, I got to do crazy, experimental, neat digital stuff because it was CBC for Kids. So I bounced around the CBC. I had a really good time for 14 years. I was the first podcaster at the CBC. Anytime they had to build a website, they sent it to me because I had an interest, not because it was in my job description at all. So I moved from associate producer to podcast producer to senior producer. And then something bad happened. I got promoted to management. That's what that looks like in real life when you're a manager. That's what they expect you to think about all the time. There are people who are really good at management, and there are people who love it, who love management. Management for me at the CBC meant that I was no longer producing anything, which was, as you can remember, something I do every day, no matter what. So I had a lot of trouble with it. I got really good at management. It actually got to the point that I was at a meeting with all these senior producers and senior executive people, and they were streaming out of the room after I'd done a presentation, and one of them took me aside and said, "Angela, you're getting such a reputation." And I said, "For what?" And they said, "You have the best PowerPoints." And I was like, holy crap. We have now turned all the way to the best PowerPoints. I never want to be known for that in my life again. I'm good. I want to be known for the best journalism or the best digital thing I created or documentaries I created on the web that won, pre-Italias. I've done all that stuff, and I was getting known for my PowerPoints. God help me. So the other thing that happened while I was in management, and managing, by the way, some amazing producers. I got to hire some of the best producers in Canada to create podcasts, to create websites, to do all those things. I even got to have my hand in it a little bit to help produce them, but I didn't actually get to build. So this is what happened. The TTC ride from my house to the CBC is about 30 minutes. I started carrying around these moleskin notebooks, and I would just, at first I was just jotting down thoughts I had. Within a couple weeks of carrying around these notebooks, this detective named Portia popped out at me. And I literally say popped out at me because I was writing a different sentence, and suddenly Portia came in. And I was like, what? Turns out that I had a character in me. I filled 30 of these notebooks in 3 months. I wrote 4 books in about 6 months. This was all on the TTC back and forth to Front Street, just back and forth, back and forth. So during the day, I was managing producers. I keep saying producing, but I wasn't producing anything. Managing producers, and during any sort of commute time, I was writing in these notebooks. And if you were sitting on the TTC next to me, you would have been like, oh, bode while I was doing the writing, and it was not pretty. But I was in a totally different zoned out world. This is what happened when I tried to turn off my creativity. This is what happened. The other thing that happened is I built cbc.ca/books, just because I could, and because people said I couldn't. They said they needed funding, they said they needed time. I did it in 2 weeks in my hammock in the backyard. Again, creativity comes out of you no matter what. You can fight it, but it's going to do it. That's what happened to my books. So I left the CBC in 2013. I told them I needed a sabbatical. I asked them for a sabbatical till the fall, and they couldn't let me have it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to get a publishing deal, and then you're going to want me back. And I did, and they did, and I said no. And I went on a book tour instead. And And this is not to speak ill of the CBC because they have been incredibly good to me. And I appreciate everything they've done for me and everything they've taught me. But what it did tell me is it's a weird, implausible way to get back to where you started from. So the first thing I told you about me is that I'm a nerd who loves detective fiction. I write it because I'm curious. I code because I'm curious. And I produce digital journalism because I'm curious. I built the cbc.ca/book site to see if I could, and I did. Last year, I sold my books to a distribution company who paid me to write a screenplay, so I wrote a screenplay. The learning never stops. I'd never done a screenplay before, and it was one of the best years of my life, other than our year at Western. So here's what I know today. The medium I love, the medium I've always worked in, I've never worked for anything but digital media. It's always changing, and people have been predicting the demise of digital storytelling for as long as they've been predicting a boom in digital advertising. Both those things I'm waiting to happen. I have not seen that. But people have also derided digital storytelling for such a long time, and I'm so done with answering that question. I've spent 15 years in the industry creating digital stuff, winning awards, enjoying myself, and pushing the boundaries. Don't tell me this isn't a real thing. Storytelling is storytelling is storytelling. What they don't understand is the medium. If you're not curious about the web, you will get bored or annoyed by it. You have to love it to create the great things. You have to experiment. You have to fail to create the great things. And you have to demonstrate. I swear to God, I have modeled this so many times for so many people when they told me it couldn't be done. You have to demonstrate it to get everyone else on board. So I'm one of those people who, like I said, believes in storytelling is storytelling. Everything I am proves that. Every brain cell I have tells a story. Like every single one tells a story in some way. But the best storytelling takes advantage of the medium that it's being expressed in, and that's where you can shine. Find your curiosity, feed it, and your path will be there like the perfect line of code or the perfect solution to a mystery. Thank you very much. Questions? Oh, sure.
So we'll pull up the application once again. And if anyone has any questions, they're welcome to come down. Warren. Or anyone else is more than welcome to come on down. And we also have the application, so if you want to throw it up on Slido, same way you've been doing it. You guys are killing it. Let's just keep it rocking. Firstly, I'd like to say that I think my sister's read your books.
Hey!
And so I'd love a picture I can show her. She'll be very jealous.
All right. I like to hear that. I like to help with sibling rivalry when I can. Is this working? It is. Uh-oh.
There we go. So here's James.
What happens at Western stays at Western.
Well, it's been great to hear what you've been up to since we graduated 19 years ago.
Oh my God.
I was really struck by when you moved from working for the CBC to writing books. And, you know, I've got kids now and, you know, all of those things in life. And I think that as time goes on, people, you know, they have to find the courage to do that. I'm wondering where you found the courage to actually believe in your work enough to be able to step away from a full-time job and a career with the CBC to actually take that step and do something that you love.
Well, I feel like I've been doing that pretty much my whole life. Like I've had to turn away from the South Asian path, and then I had to turn away from, you know, just pure journalism at CTV, and I had to turn away from a bunch of different things. I feel like I'm a cliff jumper. I do like to jump off cliffs and see what happens, and I'm getting pretty good at it, I think. And I didn't jump without knowing. Like, I know I can write, just like you know you can write. Like, we know we can write. At the end of the day, as long as someone pays me to write, I'll be okay. And they do tend to pay us, though not that well, I'm just saying. So it wasn't so much about the courage to jump as it was I couldn't stay. Does that answer your question? Like, I couldn't stay and not do it. That would have killed me. So I had to jump.
The next question is from Aska. You're amazing. Do you have any recommendations on how writers and digital content creators can build up a portfolio?
Very much so. So, I mean, just even starting your own website, getting your YouTube up, getting all of your portfolio up so that when somebody looks for you, they can find you in every single way. There's no social medium you won't find me on. Like even Snapchat, and I have really nothing to say on Snapchat, let's be clear. But I am on the Snapchat, and my child is forever cursing me for that. Your portfolio should represent you in everywhere you go, and don't assume that anything you put up won't be found. So your ability to be found is one of the things that will sell you. So when I went to a publisher and they didn't know me from a hole in the ground, they could find me and saw that I had more followers than they did. That was significant to them because they knew I had a market and that I'd started it, right? So I think my answer would be get your portfolio up there in as many places as you can. Make sure it represents you. So I have stuff on Wattpad, for example, that represents me. I don't put crap up. I only put the good stuff up. I have YouTube videos that I'm proud of. I would just say get as much as you can on the internet as possible so people can find you.
Thank you. What is your advice for women looking to work in tech?
Come work for me. So I'm currently the digital director at The Walrus. After I published my books and went on my book tours, I came back and The Walrus gave me a wonderful job. I take 1 day off a week to write. So I have that in my contract. It says Angela writes 1 day a week because I have 3 zombie books that I want to publish. They're out on submission with an agent. So come work for me. I love ladies. I also love gentlemen. I also love non-binary. I will take anybody who can write good code. Take it. Bring it. Otherwise, I mean, in general, for women looking for work in tech, just know that the industry is changing and that you can be a part of that. And the more of us there are, the more likely things change. So just get out there. Don't take no for an answer.
You're a boss. You just get out there, eh? You tell them, I'm going to do this.
Hey, you want me to
Hope
come
that's
to the
cool.
I will come to the interview with you. Let's go. Let's do the thing.
And speaking of telling people, hey, this is what I'm going to do, were your parents eventually supportive of your decisions to say, hey, I'm going to do this?
My dad was so doubtful that I was going to get into any master's program anywhere. He said, if you ever get into a master's program, I will run through the streets naked.
Did he?
I am telling you, right through our cul-de-sac, but still. He ran through the streets naked. So yes, they're very supportive. My father takes my books and tries to sell them on the street corner for like, I kid you not, he sells them at a discount. And I'm like, Dad, that costs us money. And he's like, but they're reading it. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like the Walmart of my family. That's what he is. He just undersells me. It doesn't make any sense.
Has he read them all now?
No. My mother read my first book, and she called me and she said, oh, you can write. That's the most I got.
So this next question, it says, what do you do if you're suffering from writer's block? And that's got to be a crazy question for you because you do everything. You've got the videos, the articles, the books.
No, but that actually helps you because if you're producing a whole bunch of different things, sorry, I think I'm doing feedback. If you're producing a whole bunch of different things, you can always turn to something else if you get writer's block. So if I get stuck on a story I'm writing, I'll go write some journalism for the Globe and Mail, or I'll go and produce a video for my YouTube, or I'll go and edit someone's story that they're doing for me for the Walrus. Like, if you have a lot of different avenues where your passion goes, then writer's block is just a matter of turning your car in a different direction. Works for me.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have any other questions we want to throw up there before we conclude the Q&A?
Okay.
Did you want to come down, or are you throwing something up there? All right, sweet. Come on down. Let's give a round of applause for our second in person.
Hello, my name is Mikey. Nice to meet you. You're awesome. You're like my spirit animal, I just have to say. So I know you're involved in so many things. I wanted to know if you prioritize any specific self-care practices to keep you focused and mindful.
This is going to be a funny thing to you, but on Tuesday I got invited to, like 2 weeks ago, I got invited to come speak at to a bunch of grade 5 students to talk about my books. And when I went and did it, it is like a recharge for me. Going and talking to kids, like little kids, like 10-year-olds, 4 of them dressed up like Portia, like my main character. Oh my God, so adorable. Like, it is recharging to check in with the kids. It's why I teach. I teach at Ryerson. I teach the first year course. I do it because I find young voices and young minds and all of that incredibly rejuvenating. On a separate note, I like spas.
Interesting.
Spas are good.
Noted. Thank you.
Yes, anytime.
Anyone else before we wrap this up? Oh, we got some stuff popping up. Which one are we looking at? Oh. Best presentation at Emerge. As students, how can we open up the door for ourselves?
Oh, this is a good question because nobody's going to open the door for you. So opening up the door for yourself, who asked that question? Because I'd like to know specifically, are you having trouble with a door? Are you having trouble with a specific door, or you just... Internships. So I would say get yourself out there. Get your name and your voice and your personality and your brand. So one of the things I teach is brand journalism at the University of Toronto, which is all about selling yourself. It's all about the ability to sell yourself. So you going to conferences and you introducing yourself to speakers, to panelists, to all those people, getting yourself up on the stage so people know, hey, I was going to do a thing on world building and fiction. Angela should come speak at that. The knowledge that people will have about you is a really big door opener. The other thing I'd say is take people out for coffee. Like, call me sometime and be like, can we get a coffee? I just want to talk about getting into here. And I'll be like, I know 3 people there, or I know no one. Let me see who I can find for you. Like, extend the hand. Like, the worst that can happen is they don't answer. The best that can happen is you go for coffee and you get a great connection. And I've never had a student who at some point in my life I haven't gone to afterwards and been like, excuse me, you now work at BuzzFeed. Can you get me some help with this person? Like, it's a full network. We use it in both directions. Grab a coffee. It'll help.
Thank you. And then we do have one final question we've been asking most of our speakers, which is, what is success to you personally? As our kind of theme of today is success, your terms, your path. And you definitely exemplify that, so we'd love to hear what your definition of success is.
I have a few. So one of my first jobs at the CBC, when I got promoted to management, like I said, that wasn't a great move for me in that case. But one of the first things my boss who promoted me said to me was, only hire people you would work for. And to me, that is a line of success. If I would work for you, like if I've hired you and I would work, that is a huge success for me. Because that means that I have just mentored someone who will make great things happen. So that's the first line of success. Probably the next line of success is doing something you're passionate about. I don't have to worry about going at home and doing like my side hustles. My side hustle is my main hustle. Like, if your success, like that to me is the success. I'm doing my side hustle, I'm getting paid for it. Let's do that more.
Thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you. Well, good.
All right, with that, we are concluding our sixth annual Emerge Media Conference. I've got a few final notes, and then we are heading out of here. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of our awesome speakers. Angela, Dave, all of our speakers from today were awesome, so let's give a round of applause for just everyone as a whole. I'd like to give a round of applause as well for all the students and faculty of Guelph-Humber that all worked together to make this thing happen, because without them, obviously this wouldn't be here, so round of applause. And then let's make it a trio. One round for our sponsors for all of their help. And I think that's all. So thank you everyone for coming. Make your way safely down to the front lobby. It's been awesome. If you see me, say hi, and have a safe ride home. If you're sticking around for the EMAs, just please ask you to wait down in the lobby so there's not too much clutter and we can clean up and everything. Thanks, everybody.